Today we're going to check out over 15 video game Mandela effects. So, what is a Mandela effect? Put simply, it's a strange phenomenon where a large group of people remember something differently than it is now. Something you swear used to be one way is now different than you remember. No one knows what exactly causes this and why some Mandela effects deeply affect some people, but not others. It's a fascinating mystery that I love talking about. So obviously, video games can be affected as well. Meaning, if you've played any of the games that I talk about in this video, you might very well be affected by the Mandela effect. Today, I'm covering a mixture of new examples as well as ones that I've covered in the past combined into one giant video for you to enjoy. Topics include Super Mario, Pokemon, Skyrim, Halo, Call of Duty, The Legend of Zelda, Minecraft, and more. Timestamps for each are in the description if you want to skip around. So like, subscribe now if you haven't already, and click that notification bell. Let's kick off this video with a lightning round. I'm going to cover 5 Mandela effects, and for each one, I'll give you 2 options to choose from, and you tell me which one you remember being correct. Ready? Let's start with Skyrim. That's right, the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. Remember a few years back, there was that meme going around with the arrow and the knee? Well, what is actually said in-game? Is it, I used to be an adventurer like you, and then I took an arrow to the knee? Or was it, I used to be an adventurer like you, then I took an arrow in the knee? Many people online remember arrow to the knee, but now, that isn't correct. It's actually arrow in the knee, and apparently, it always has been.
I used to be an adventurer like you. Then I took an arrow in the knee.
It's a subtle change, as they often are, but still one that makes you feel weird if you played a lot of Skyrim. So which one do you remember? Let's talk Minecraft now. When a song finishes playing in the jukebox, what happens? The disc pops out, or the song ends and nothing happens? As weird as this sounds, nothing happens. The disc waits for you to take it out, but tons of people remember the disc popping out when the song ends. Many people assume this was an update or an older feature that got removed, but apparently it's never existed. The discs have never popped out. Next up is the Pokemon Psyduck and its evolution Golduck. What type of Pokemon are they? Are they water? Or are they water and psychic? This one came as a shock to many, but Psyduck and Golduck have never actually been psychic Pokemon, despite them being psychic ducks, and being able to use the moves Psybeam, Psyshock, Psychic, and many others. What do you remember? Continuing with Pokemon, remember this stone Pokemon Onyx? How is its name spelled? Onix. This certainly isn't the only Pokemon spelling Mandela effect, but it is the most popular of all of them. For some reason, Onyx has just messed up a lot of people. What do you remember? Last but not least of our lightning round is the video game Halo Reach. One of the armor abilities you can equip in-game, is it called Armor Lock or Armor Lockup? Everyone online has always called it Armor Lock. Every video, every message board, every comment, everyone has always said Armor Lock. But surprisingly enough, in-game, it's actually called Armor Lockup. I don't know about you, but this one messed me up pretty good. Now that the lightning round is complete, let's dig into some deeper, more in-depth video game Mandela effects. As I said before, timestamps are in the description if you want to jump around. Please enjoy. Today we're starting off with a video game classic, Super Mario Bros. For the Nintendo Entertainment System. Released back in 1985 in America, this title introduced millions to the classic left-to-right side-scrolling genre of video games. From the very first level, 1-1, it taught you the fundamentals of how to play Mario, as well as a ton of its gameplay features. Enemies to step on, mushrooms to collect, secrets to find, but here is where the Mandela effect comes in. Did level 1-1 of Super Mario Bros. Have a piranha plant in it? If you're unfamiliar with what a piranha plant is, it's the sharp-toothed plant that comes out of the green pipes and tries to eat Mario. So let me ask you, the experts, did level 1-1 of Super Mario Bros. Have a piranha plant in it? Yes or no? As it is now, the very first level in Super Mario Bros. Does not actually have a piranha plant in it. This Mandela effect recently became popular online because of a post regarding its placement in the first level. The commenter was talking about his earliest gaming memories and how it took him so long as a child to beat the first level because of the piranha plant that came out of the pipe. Amazingly enough, when it was brought up the first level didn't have a piranha plant, the thread turned to insanity. I'm curious to hear who among you remembers Super Mario Bros. With the piranha plant on level 1-1 or without. Up next, we're talking about Mario Kart, the legendary arcade-style racing game that people have enjoyed for decades. And today, specifically, the Nintendo 64 version, Mario Kart 64. This Mandela effect has to do with the insanely unforgiving track, Rainbow Road. The difficulty comes from its trackless edges and hairpin turns. So tell me, did Mario Kart 64's version of Rainbow Road have rails along the sides? The Mandela effect here is that so many people remember Mario Kart 64's Rainbow Road not having rails, thus making it a much tougher race. But apparently it's always had rails? The Super Nintendo version of Mario Kart's Rainbow Road did not have rails, but apparently the N64 one did. This seems like an open and shut case of potentially mixing up the games, but numerous people online claim that they have only played the Nintendo 64 version. So why would they know what's in the older version of Mario Kart that they've never played? During the original PlayStation and Nintendo 64 era, there was an amazing Spider-Man game released called simply Spider-Man. This game featured the same artwork on all of its cases, boxes, and manuals. This was released on the PlayStation, the Nintendo 64, the Game Boy, the PC, it was all over the place. So here's the Mandela effect regarding this. This same artwork with Spider-Man climbing up the wall is on every single thing, except for one. On the N64 cartridge, Spider-Man is now missing. The wall's still there, the background, the logo, everything's still there, but Spider-Man is gone. So here's my history with this game. I played this game on the Nintendo 64 when I was a child. I got it brand new. When this Mandela effect first started spreading, I didn't believe it, and I went and pulled my old N64 cartridges, and sure enough, Spider-Man is missing. It's almost disturbing because it is the exact same artwork, but Spider-Man is removed. Why? The best guess I could find online was that it possibly had to do with licensing and they had to pay for every time Spider-Man was printed. But that argument falls apart because that would mean that they put Spider-Man on the manual, but not on the game's actual cartridge. It makes no sense. All around, this one is really bizarre. I'm not sure how many people in my audience play video games or have played Call of Duty before, but just follow me here. This gets pretty interesting. Call of Duty is an annualized first-person shooter franchise, with a new release every single year. Because of this form of overwhelming monetization, Call of Duty can make a lot of extra money by playing with people's nostalgia, by bringing back multiplayer maps from older games into the newer games. This Mandela effect stems from one of those situations. There was an older map called Standoff from Call of Duty Black Ops 2. Now this map was brought over to the newer Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War video game. So a map from 2012 returned in 2021. Obviously older fans were excited and happily replayed this map again in multiplayer. Until a professional Call of Duty player tweeted this: "Can't believe they just added this sign." And from there, this Mandela effect blew up. One professional streamer or player after another jumped in asking the same question: why remake this entire map, but then add this random sign in this random spot in the map? I mean, it isn't outside of the level, it's a real object in the game, so it isn't just art. For example, if you threw a grenade at it, it would bounce off of it. If someone was sniping at you, it was potential cover for you to hide behind. So it's a tangible change to a map, and no one really knows why it was changed. So people went back to the original Call of Duty Black Ops game and discovered that the sign wasn't just a new addition to the map's remake. It was always there, in both games. To make things even freakier for professional Call of Duty players, fans and amateur sleuths started finding old clips of those same pro players playing on the old map from back in the day. And in those clips existed the sign that the pro players don't remember. I mean, the obvious, easy, least exciting possibility is that the sign was always there and people simply didn't notice it. I'm sure that's absolutely a possibility. But as I'll speak about later in the video during the Britney Spears Mandela effect segment, fans know their fandom. When it comes to this kind of stuff, you gotta ask the fans. So I sat down out of curiosity and I watched multiple Call of Duty pros and professional streamers freak out over this change. Like legitimately freak out. Some even claiming that this is the first Mandela effect that has ever affected them. So however you stand on this Mandela effect, if you remember the sign or not, I've got to say it's incredible how a sign, a simple sign, can cause so much mental trauma for so many people. Imagine what a massive change would create in people. It's a pretty scary thought. Lastly, I'll say this. In a game like Call of Duty, there are only so many maps in each game. So a part of being a professional is learning every single map inside and out. When you play these games, you play them over and over and over again. Polling from other people on Twitter have shown that a slight majority don't remember the sign being there. So where do you fall? This one's pretty interesting. It's almost a 50-50 split. For those of you who have played these games, I'm curious to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Is it just a sign, or is it something more? Next up is a Mandela effect that relates to the very popular video game Halo 2. Now, this Mandela effect is more of an explanation, and not so much of a question, so I'm going to try and break it down as simply as I can. In every mainline Halo game from Halo 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, you could play split screen in co-op, meaning that it splits the TV screen into two halves and you and your friend can play at the same time. Now, this co-op feature has existed on every single level in Halo 1 through 4, but now it doesn't. Somehow the first two levels of Halo 2 are no longer playable in co-op, and they never have been. No matter what you do, you can't even force it to work in these games on the original Xbox game or the remastered version on Xbox One and PC. It doesn't exist anymore, it has simply vanished. Creepier still, you can't find footage of this existing. Now, the easiest explanation is that it has always been this way and that Halo fans are being silly. Well, here's the argument against that. Halo is a game that is built around replayability, meaning you can play it over and over and over and discover new things and have new experiences. Single player, co-op, multiplayer, the trifecta of Halo. If somehow the first two levels of Halo 2 weren't playable in co-op, this detail would have been known and discussed years ago. I mean, this game originally came out in 2004, yet somehow this has never come up before on the internet until this year. That's incredible, almost inconceivable. The first level is called The Heretic, and it's simply a cutscene, or an animated movie. But since this would be in co-op, it would just be playing for both players. As of now, you can't play that with another person. Even sitting in front of the same TV, if you say let's play co-op and press start, they just skip the opening cutscene. It simply doesn't play. The second level is called The Armory, and this one is especially confusing because plenty of people have memories of playing this level with a friend, myself included. This is one of the craziest Mandela effects I've ever encountered because I have memories playing this level with my cousin when I was younger. I can see it clear as day. Both of us were trapped in that tiny monorail as it moved from one part of the level to another, while we jumped around waiting to start shooting. This one is unexplainable. I just don't get it. There's even a comment I found, with over 1,100 thumbs up. Somehow everyone is misremembering, and this is all a fabrication or something has changed. And 1,100, that's a lot of people. Did you ever play these levels in co-op, or have you never been able to? I'm excited to hear what you have to say. Pokemon is the largest entertainment brand in the entire world, meaning it has made more money than any other entertainment brand ever, currently sitting at $100 billion. All this to say, Pokemon is unbelievably popular all around the world, so when a Mandela effect happens to Pokemon, you better believe people notice. Today, we're talking about the original, Pikachu's tail. Pikachu is the main icon for Pokemon. This electric mouse is a household name for most people under 30, and its iconic look has gone through some changes over the years. Originally quite the bigger fellow, Pikachu has slimmed down quite a bit, but its overall design and look has changed very little otherwise. He's perfect. Anyway, the main point of contention is Pikachu's tail. As it is now, it has a little bit of brown at the bottom of its tail, but there are quite a few out there that believe it used to have black at the tip instead. Some have written this off as too similar to Pikachu's ears, while others have said no, that's the point, it's a similar look and aesthetic. Where do you stand on all this? Which is right? Well, as it goes now, the brown at the bottom has always been there and the black tip has almost never existed. In fact, the residue for black tip tail on Pikachu is some of the hardest to find today. Early artwork, books, trading cards, the original games, and commercials, all of them only show the brown tail now. So either an unbelievable amount of people are remembering this wrong, or something has changed. And that something is what we call the Mandela effect. Some of the very few examples we have of a black tip tail Pikachu today are things that came out after the origins of Pokemon, so past the original point that everyone is speaking of. One example is Cosplay Pikachu, who has a black heart at the end of its tail, but it isn't perfect either. Nowadays, they make it so that there's a curved heart-like tip at the end of all female Pikachus, but I'm old enough to remember when they didn't do that. So this is a cool throwback, but it isn't what we all remember. Next is a quick flash of Pikachu with the correct tail in the Pokemon Sun and Moon anime opening. It's only there for a split second, but that is the tail that so many of us remember. Why in this specific scene though is it black when everywhere else in the intro and the show it isn't? Is it an animator or a colorist just being cute? Maybe it's a throwback to the classic days? Or is it possible it's just the circular shadow continuing across its body? Sadly, it's probably that. The truth is out there, somewhere. Another explanation people sometimes bring up is Pikachu's earlier form, Pichu, because Pichu has a black tail. Now the tip of Pichu's tail is black, and some could argue maybe we're confusing these two. I would argue that isn't the case though, because when Pokemon first came out over here in America, Pichu did not exist yet. This was the original 151 Pokemon days, so Pichu couldn't have been an influence. It didn't exist. This one is seemingly unimportant, and I totally get that, especially if you're not a Pokemon fan, but to the people who do remember it, it's deeply troubling. Let's talk about the gaming giant Nintendo, specifically regarding the Nintendo Entertainment System launch title, Super Mario Bros. This beloved video game was released in 1985 in Japan and North America, and in 1987 Europe and Australia. Super Mario Bros. Is an instant classic who many attribute to the revival of video games after the 1983 video game crash. Super Mario Bros. Went on to sell a total of 40 million copies, and over the next few decades, Mario became a billion-dollar franchise for Nintendo. All of this to say, Super Mario Bros. Was insanely popular. So much so, this Mandela effect should affect quite a few of you. So here's my question. In the original Super Mario Bros., when you reach the end of a world, at least for the first 7 times, you're greeted by Toad saying, "Thank you, Mario, but blank, princess is in another castle." Fill in that blank. What goes there? Since tens of millions of people have played this should be an easy answer. Many online seem to remember it as the. Some out there seem to remember it as your. But the accurate phrase is actually, "Thank you, Mario, but our princess is in another castle." Is that what you remember? And if not, which did you remember? There's a lot of debate online about which one came first. Maybe it was changed, maybe it was based off memes, what could have changed it, I don't remember this, I do, back and forth. All kinds of arguing, all kinds of drama. I'm on team the princess, but I'm not as passionate about this as some are online. I mean, I loved playing Mario growing up, but I was more of a Legend of Zelda and Metroid kid. Also, side note, have any of you ever noticed how it looks like Toad is flipping you off in the final scene? How rude. Back in 2004, the classic first-person shooter video game Halo 2 was released on the original Xbox. In Halo 2, the story was split up between 2 main characters, the Master Chief and the Arbiter. This Mandela effect has to do with the Arbiter and his armor design from Halo 2. This game being the introduction to the Arbiter, his design and look was iconic. It was permanently burned into the memories of everyone who played this game. But now, it seems like new details have appeared on his character model that, according to hundreds of people online, didn't exist before. So what do you think? Do you remember the Arbiter having this extremely detailed design in his pauldron? You see, the armor on the Arbiter is unique and memorable because of its strange design. One shoulder is raised much higher than the other. The raised side is always visible in cinematics as well as cooperative play. Somebody at some point would have surely noticed this delicate engraving before, right? These games are beloved, they're played over and over and over again, they're analyzed, there's dozens and dozens of YouTube channels dedicated to researching, studying, and playing these games, and no one's ever noticed this before? That's when this thought came to me. Halo 2 Anniversary is the remaster of the original Halo 2, and it came out nearly 10 years after the fact. I initially thought that this change to the Arbiter's armor could have been a visual upgrade or a redesign for the remastered version. But when comparing the 2 games, I discovered that actually the symbol is in both games. So what do you all think? I find it incredible that this very beautiful detail has never been noticed before in one of the most beloved and replayed games ever. People have played Halo games for nearly 20 years, but this was just discovered. Is this a Mandela effect, or has this detail always been there? Let me hear your thoughts in the comments below. Let's talk about one of the most acclaimed video games of all time, The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time for the Nintendo 64 console, released all the way back in 1998. In this game, there is a location called the Fishing Pond in Lake Hylia, where you, playing as Link, can relax and fish to your heart's content. The pond owner allows you in, sells you bait, and lets you go wild. Now, there is a legendary fish in this pond that has been discussed, debated, and searched for as long as people could comment about it online. This is the Hylian Loach, the rarest and most sought-after fish in the game. Not only is it hard to find, it's even tougher to catch. So what is the Mandela effect regarding the Hylian Loach? Well, it turns out that the Hylian Loach doesn't exist in Ocarina of Time anymore. Or at least its name doesn't. What so many people remember as the Hylian Loach is now called the Hyrule Loach. And I could understand some people never having heard of this before saying, that doesn't seem like a big deal, but if you spent hours of your youth in that pond fishing for this legendary beast, you know this feels weird and wrong. And if you look up Hylian Loach online, you'll come across numerous guides, GameFAQ pages, and forum posts from back in the day. Comparatively, there are significantly more search results for the Hylian Loach than there are for the Hyrule Loach. So is this simply a case of the majority of people online misremembering this legendary fish's name? Or has something changed? Let's dive deep into this topic. Let's check out the official Nintendo Power Player's Guide for The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. I'm sure this strategy guide from 1998 will surely solve our mystery. On page 56 and 57, we have an entire spread about Lake Hylia, not Lake Hyrule. So does it mention the Loach? Oh yeah. Unfortunately though, it only says this: with the help of a special lure, Link caught the Loach, the largest fish the pond has to offer. Meaning this strategy guide mentions the word Loach, but not the name that so many people are arguing over. I mean, that's just hilarious. So then I found another strategy guide, an unofficial guide from 1998 by Bradley Games. And it mentions a huge fish called the loach, but again, no exact name. Incredible. So let's investigate further. It turns out that the Hylian loach does appear in another Zelda game, the 2006 Nintendo Wii and Nintendo GameCube versions of The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. In this title, the fish is still sporting the name that so many of us remember, the Hylian loach. In fact, there's even a book in this game, with a joke as a title, called The Legend of the Hylian Loach, Twilight Fish. It's almost like this game is aware of the mystery. Now you might be thinking, okay, these are different fish, who cares? Maybe everyone just got it wrong. But then there is a picture in Twilight Princess of the pond owner from Ocarina of Time holding a Hylian loach. I mean, that's as direct a connection to one another as you could make. So let's look at the timeline here. 1998, it's a Hylian loach, or at least people think it is. It's now apparently a Hyrule loach. Next up is 2006. It's now a Hylian loach. So is there any other evidence or residue that it was once called a Hylian loach before 2006? Because right now it's all based off of memories. A photo in Twilight Princess, and a bunch of online posts, comments, and videos. Upon doing even more research on this stupid fish, I found something really fascinating. I learned that it was mentioned in another of Nintendo's video games. This game is Animal Crossing for the Nintendo GameCube, that was released in 2002. Now, Animal Crossing is one of the most fun and relaxing games ever. Among the many things that you could do in that title, one of those is fish. And if you were lucky enough, you could even catch a loach. Now, in that game, it was simply called a loach. But if you did catch one, you'd receive text on screen that read, "I caught a loach. You don't suppose it's Hylian, do you?" And there it is, another Nintendo game making a direct reference to The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time's rare fish and legendary catch. The timing lines up, and the joke only works if everyone thinks that fish is indeed called a Hylian loach. That's right, this text was written after Ocarina of Time, but before Twilight Princess. It is the perfect piece of evidence that at least the localizers and writers at Nintendo of America, the people writing and publishing this game, believe the fish was called a Hylian loach, a name that now doesn't make any sense if there wasn't a Hylian loach until 2006 with Twilight Princess. Why would they make a joke about a Hylian loach if it was never actually called that? Just think about this for a second. There was a fish name in 1998. In 2002 they referenced the fish name, and in 2006 is actually the first time it was ever used now. Why would there be references and jokes to the name that never existed if it didn't exist? In fact, after seeing all this information, I'd argue that the Hylian loach in Twilight Princess was named that because of the original and now seemingly changed name that never existed. This change is the perfect example of a Mandela effect and the weird ripple effect it creates. The original name in the original game was seemingly and miraculously changed, but its effects and lasting impacts weren't. This Mandela effect is in regards to the 2016 hero-based multiplayer first-person shooter video game, Overwatch. Now this game was extremely popular and addictive, meaning players would often play match after match, hour after hour. After enough time of playing, it wouldn't be uncommon to know all of the characters, all of the moves, all of the maps and modes, as well as the dialogue between the different characters. This is pretty common among multiplayer games and their fans. But in the case of Overwatch, there was apparently dialogue between two characters that a lot of people seem to remember, but was never actually said. In fact, it never existed. Apparently, it was one of the random interactions before a match starts between Reaper and Mercy. Mercy would say, "This isn't what I intended for you, Reyes," and Reaper would respond with, "You know exactly what you were doing." This line would have been significant regarding the overall story and lore for Overwatch because it suggests that Mercy had something to do with transforming Gabriel Reyes into Reaper, which also implies that Mercy isn't the saint she portrays herself to be. Except this line apparently was never written, never recorded, and never actually put into Overwatch. How do we know this? Well, for starters, the former lead writer of Overwatch, Michael Chu, has come out on multiple occasions on forums and on Twitter to denounce the existence of these lines. He's even come out before and said lines like this, "I'm not sure where this came from. Maybe there's another line that sounds similar to it, but the 'this is not what I intended for you, Reyes' line/exchange does not actually exist in the game." If anyone would know this, it would be the lead writer of the game, but the mystery surrounding these lines of dialogue continued. If you look this up on a search engine, you'll find countless examples of people talking about this missing dialogue. What happened to it? Where did it go? Was it actually real? Some Overwatch players have data mined the game in an attempt to extract extra details, information, and potential secrets in its files, but within that data, there are no lines of dialogue like the ones some people seem to remember. Some have argued online that they remember hearing the dialogue in the beta for Overwatch, as in the nearly complete but not quite finished version of the game that you could play before its official release. Now this right here could be the smoking gun to solving this Mandela effect, but then it was revealed that numerous players who had never played the beta, only the official release, had heard this line as well. So unfortunately, that couldn't be the solution. So what now? Where did this come from? Honestly, at this point, it would probably be a relief to my sanity if someone found a recording of those voice lines, is what the former lead writer shared on Twitter. This Mandela effect is especially interesting for 3 reasons. The first is that Overwatch has been officially shut down because Overwatch 2 recently came out, meaning you can't play the original anymore. They instead want you to go to the sequel. The second reason is that tens of millions of players around the world have played the first game. So if this dialogue actually existed, there has to be someone, somewhere out there in the world, that has captured it. The third and final reason is because of the staggering amount of people who have played this game, and the fact that the game is now unplayable, this makes this Mandela effect truly lost, unless something of a miracle happens. If you played Overwatch 1 before it was shut down, have you ever heard this line before? Is this a Mandela effect? Or was this a change to the lore of Overwatch and Blizzard, its developer, is just gaslighting everyone? If this bit of dialogue does exist out there, somewhere in all of the footage on YouTube and Twitch of Overwatch, someone must have captured it. Honestly, with the Mandela effect, you never really know. Sometimes things just disappear. This Mandela effect has caused a ton of controversy and a lot of debate online. I'm talking about the Nintendo Entertainment System, or the NES, the console that released in America in 1985. As anyone who has ever owned the system knows, when you insert a game cartridge into the system, you have to press the cartridge down into place before pressing the power button. Only after these steps are completed will the game actually play. And if you messed up any of these steps, or if the 72-pin connector inside the device was damaged, you'd instead get an infuriating red blinking light letting you know it wasn't going to work. Now, I've owned 2 NESs in my lifetime. One was a brand new console, purchased from a toy store, and the other was one that I purchased years later on the secondhand market because I wanted to experience some nostalgia. After hearing all this, you might be wondering, what is the Mandela effect regarding this? Here it is. Apparently, you don't have to press the game cartridges down to play them. And not just that, you never have. When I first heard this, I thought, what? There's no way this is correct. But it seems like it is. The games were apparently playable without pressing them all the way down in the system. And if you've never used an NES before, you have no idea how mind-blowing this actually is. It totally changes the functionality of a device people have used for over 35 years. So I've been digging into this topic for days, and it's been really strange. I've found forum posts from 2008, 2010, 2014, and 2018 of people being confused that their NES systems work without their game cartridges being pushed down all the way. Then on the other side of the internet, I keep finding videos of people saying this is an effect of replacing the 72-pin connector inside the device. But surely this isn't just a case of every single NES console out there having its internals replaced, right? You're talking potentially tens of millions of consoles and all of them have had their internals replaced? I suppose it's a possibility, but I've also found Reddit threads and comments from people claiming that they have their original NES consoles from their childhood that have never had anything replaced and now work without pushing down the game cartridges. Weird mysteries like this are always so fun to pursue and try to solve. Honestly, this whole NES situation has had me scratching my head. If I still had either of my NES consoles from back in the day, I'd check them, but I don't. I had the perfect situation to test them too, one original and one previously owned. It's the best test case possible, but alas. Next up, I found a helpful YouTube guide to getting your NES to work if it isn't. Cleaning it, wiggling the cartridge back and forth, etc. You know all the methods. Then randomly he drops the phrase,
so if the cartridge didn't work after sliding it back and forth and cleaning the cartridge, go ahead and push down so that it goes up, but don't remove it. Just leave it like that and then hit power. And sure enough, it works in that position as well.
Just leave the cartridge up and turn it on. It works perfectly. This is why we have trust issues. I don't understand how this thing that never worked and has never worked now totally works. I had to go back to the beginning to see if I was really losing my mind. So I looked up an original owner's manual for the Nintendo Entertainment System just to see what it said. Just as I remembered from back then, it says, press down on the game pack until it locks into place and close the chamber lid. There it is, evidence straight from Nintendo that you did indeed have to press the game cartridge down, or game pack as they called it back then, down to get the game to play. Is this just a case of all of these consoles being repaired with aftermarket parts? Has this ability always been there and somehow tens of millions of people just didn't notice? Is it all simply replaced 72-pin connectors that function differently than they should? Malfunctioning hardware across the world? Or has something changed, where you can now play your NES games without pressing down the cartridge? I've seen so much conflicting information on this Mandela effect, my head is spinning. I don't know what this means for the NES, or for this being a potential Mandela effect, but what this does mean is that history used to say you had to press it down, and now that always assumed fact is being questioned. This bizarre true story begins all the way back in July 2010 on a Pokemon fan art thread on a website called 4chan. 4chan is a unique website in the fact that it doesn't track your IP address, meaning you can't be followed or looked up after the fact. This kind of anonymous freedom usually leads to people saying all kinds of bad things, but in this case, it leaves us with an amazing mystery and no way of fully solving it. This particular Pokemon thread was started by a poster offering a challenge to draw your favorite Pokemon without looking at any kind of reference. Basically meaning draw your favorite Pokemon by memory only, don't look up any artwork. Simple enough, right? After a few entries, an anonymous user drew this weird doodle. A strange drawing of a blue-colored frog-like creature with a yellow spiral pattern on its stomach. The strange part about this is that this isn't a Pokemon. It isn't now, and it wasn't then. It was just a poorly drawn doodle made for laughs? Trolling? Or was it? The reactions to this drawing were hilarious. Laughter, humor, dismissive comments, about everything you'd expect. Then, the anonymous user was asked what Pokemon this doodle was, and he replied, Tentaquil. So at this point, I'd like to acknowledge that some viewers obviously have no idea about the inner workings of Pokemon. That's fine. I'll do my best to keep it as simple and easy to understand in this video. Tentaquil is a confusing name for a number of reasons. First of all, the name is a combination of two already existing Pokemon, Tentacool and Cyndaquil. This is what they both look like. Obviously, there is no other relation between these two than the combined names for Tentaquil. The second detail is that each of these Pokemon used in this name came from the first two generations of Pokemon. Now stick with me here, I'm gonna make it simple. Each time there is a big new Pokemon game, it is labeled a generation. The first generation was introduced as Pokemon Red and Pokemon Blue for the Game Boy. This first generation had 151 Pokemon in it, and this is where Tentacool comes from. The second generation was introduced as Pokemon Gold and Pokemon Silver. The second generation added 100 new Pokemon, bringing the total up to 251. This is where Cyndaquil comes from. So there you go, you understand all the details needed. Generation 1 and 2 are all that matters in this video. So now, back to the mystery. Tentaquil became an internet meme spawning countless jokes, videos, and he was even later modded into some of the original games. So he began his life as a doodle, but in the end, he became this thing that was much bigger than that. The end. But wait, where's the Mandela effect? Well, we're getting there, and trust me, it's worth the build up. Stick with me. When games are being developed, they aren't fully playable. It takes a long time and a lot of revisions to get to a final product that people in the public can actually play. When the pieces first come together and you can actually play it somewhat, this is called an alpha. When the game starts to become good enough that you can start showing it off without it being fully finished, this is called a beta. Obviously there is more to it than this, but I'm trying to keep it very simple for you. Japan, 1997. Nintendo, the publisher of Pokemon, comes to a massive event called Space World, where developers and publishers show off their new and upcoming games. Displayed there is the beta for Pokemon Gold and Silver. This beta was short, playable, and tons of the pieces that were included within it would never appear in the retail release. The game changed drastically after this show, and the final game that came out was very different than the beta. Only a select few people in the Japanese public got to actually play this beta. So now that you have all of the history lessons, I'm going to bring it all back together to a time that's a little bit more relevant to us. 2018. 8 years after a doodle of Tentaquil was first posted online, randomly, the demo from 1997 of Pokemon Gold and Silver from Space World was released online. The internet went into a frenzy. Digging through the beta, they were tearing open the code that made the game to find rare and unreleased art assets, music, and features that we never got to see. Think of it like a time capsule from 1999. What were the developers doing? What did they create? What was inside of this game that we never got to see? Well, this is how we got to see it. Included in those files was the original line of the 100 Pokemon that they were going to include in Pokemon Gold and Silver. Now, some were familiar to us because they ended up in the final game, but many were completely new and never before seen. And within this exciting discovery of never before seen Pokemon was one that really stood out. A strangely familiar, but somehow brand new Pokemon. It was Tentaquil in all but the name. Somehow an anonymous poster on 4chan drew from memory a real Pokemon design that was never released or revealed 8 years before anyone else ever knew about it. What in the world? How on earth did he or she know? By all accounts, it isn't possible. These beta Pokemon, they were never released or revealed to the public. This demo was only seen and played in Japan. And these designs, they were locked away in that code, meaning that no one playing at Space World could have accessed these designs. These were locked away inside the code, they were not actually included in the beta. So by all accounts, this is impossible. It turns out the internet felt the same way. So tell me, what do you think? Is this an example of the Mandela effect or something else? As I briefly mentioned in the beginning of this video, this mystery can never be fully solved because of the forced anonymous nature of 4chan. Because of this, we can't see who the original creator of the Tentaquil drawing was, and because of that, we'll never get to hear his or her explanation. What do you think about all this? Is this all pure coincidence? Was this anonymous commenter privy to Japanese insider information and from one of the tightest-lipped companies in the video game industry? And then to follow up on that question, if you said yes, with that secret information that he or she obtained, they used it to doodle out one of the cut Pokemon on a forum 11 years later, just to be made fun of for years and years, and then lastly to be redeemed 8 years later anonymously for internet points? This is one of those truth is stranger than fiction stories.